Hello, and welcome to this afternoon's program, Crowdsourcing the American Revolution, presented by historian Beth Van Duzer. My name is Anke Voss, and I'm the curator of the William Monroe Special Collections here at the Concord Free Public Library. Concord and surrounding communities are very good about celebrating April 19th. However, there was more to the American Revolution than the critical date. The war lasted for 8 years. Beth Van Duzer will speak about her research, including finding individuals who fought for Concord during the 8 years of war, who died in service, and where they were buried. Most importantly, learn how the Concord 250 History and Education Subcommittee would like your assistance to make this database more complete. Beth Van Duzer is an independent historian here in Concord, Massachusetts. She earned her bachelor's degree in English from Montclair State University and her master's degree in history, focused on public history, from Southern New Hampshire University. Beth is the co-chair and clerk of the Concord 250 History and Education Subcommittee and is the owner of Concord Walking Tours, a history, research, and tour company. Welcome, Beth.
Thank you. Hi. All right, I'm loud to begin with, so I'm afraid I'm going to be really loud with this. But we are being videotaped for anyone who doesn't know. There's a video camera there. And so this is like the opening credits of the movie. So I'm going to do thanks to people for the opening credits of the movie. So first, this font is different than it was on my computer. Let's hope this works. Okay, so thank you to the Concord Free Public Library for hosting this. Thank you to Nate Smith, Anke Voss, and Jesse Hopper. They are the stewards of our collection of tangible history of all these documents. They're the reason I get to look at these things, and they say yes when I want to look at things, and they say no when I want to look at things, because some things just can't be looked at. Some of these documents I've only seen on microfilm that are on the back table, so I saw them for the first time this week in person. So we thank them for their jobs. And also thank you to the History and Education Subcommittee. Some people are here, and the members are, oh gosh, this is terrible. Sorry. Why is it doing that? All right, we'll find out. You just don't want to look at my face the whole time, I thought. You might want slides, but we have a great subcommittee. David Wood is the co-chair, Bob Gross is on it, and I call Bob Gross, David Wood, and Joel Bowie the history heavy hitters of our little group. I send them emails, and when I get a flurry of emails back, it makes me very happy, because usually it's something they don't know or they didn't know about. So it makes me feel like I actually did my job, so it's good. And then, okay, the talk can begin. Those are my thank yous. So, does anyone recognize this image? Anyone want to volunteer what it is? Oh, so close, so close. So this is an image of Concord on April 19th. Does one image tell us everything that happened on April 19th? No. If we add more images, does this tell us everything that happened on April 19th? No. So if anyone went to the Civil War Monument rededication, Mary Hartman gave a little speech in the beginning, and we're all stealing what she said, by the way. And she stated we were seeking history. And as a historian, that's what I do. I look for things from the past, I cobble them together, and I hope to make a more complete history. And that's kind of like what these images do, but even with these 4 images, it misses stuff. If anyone here is from Menotomy/Arlington, we know you're not in these. Also Lincoln. So yeah, so there's more than just what the images give you, right? We're always looking for more. All right, so our subcommittee was tasked to look for a couple of things. For the first time, as David Wood says, these should be easy questions to answer until you start looking at them. We are asked to look for who fought from Concord during the entire 8 years of the Revolution, who from Concord died in service during the Revolutionary War, and where are they buried? So Henry Dane was the first chair of the 250th Executive Committee, and then Gary Clayton became chair, and both of them asked us specifically to look for people who died during the 8 years of the war to see if it was possible for them to be on a monument somewhere. That was really Henry. But who died? Up until this started, we only read William Emerson's name on Memorial Day. There had to be more than him. So that's APP 26, Names on War Memorials. Because David Wood and I were just on a committee to get somebody named, a name onto a war memorial, we really know what this is about. They need to have a birthplace, home, or grave, according to APP 26, which is a Concord thing. So we had to find people here that had birthplace, homes, or graves. But we also included people who had their service credited to the town of Concord. They may have been hired by Concord, but they never had a birthplace, home, or grave here. Then we chose to add those who had atypical service, and this allowed us to add the only woman on our list, as well as citizens who were prisoners of war. So these prisoners of war, one dies, but one is exchanged for somebody in the military on the other side. And finally, Joel Bowie created a document that lists those who fought from Concord on April 19th in the different minute companies, and he went through the town books to figure out who was paid. But what if you only have the minute company document and you didn't see that he got paid? What if there's only another entry for a person and there's nothing to support it? So Bob Gross suggested at one of our meetings, we aren't taking things away from people. If they said they were there, we're gonna believe it. If it was in the book that they signed up to be a Minuteman, we're gonna believe they showed up on April 19th. So in the back, there is a town book, and it's open to a page of Minutemen who were paid in 1776 for their service back on April 19th, 1775. Not everybody got paid in 1775, and some didn't get paid till 1777. So we're not really good at paying people, apparently, in Concord back then. Yeah. All right, so now we have our parameters for who we're going to research, who we're going to include, and then we have primary sources. So first thing, there are 17 volumes of Massachusetts Soldiers and Sailors of the Revolutionary War. One of them is back there. They're a great starting point, but they don't have all the information. They were printed in 1896. And any documentation that came to anyone else after that, they're not in the book. Also, Purchase Brown fought in the Revolution. He is the only Purchase Brown from Massachusetts to fight in the Revolution, and it's open to the page for him because he has 3 separate entries. So if it's listed with Concord, he's on one thing, then he's in another place, but trust me, he is the only person named Purchase Brown in that book. Then I visited the Massachusetts Archives in Dorchester, and they actually have had a lot of their documentation scanned, and that's what they prefer people to use. But while I was there, I'm like, if the scan is bad, can I come and get a picture? And they said yes. So they prefer the online stuff, so that's what I did. And then there's the Town of Concord Archives, and there's special collections, and there's a record in the archives that identified Patriot of Color for the first time, and I'll talk about him in a little bit. So our initial count after searching primary sources, about 500 names. Yeah, no, save it, yeah. Because then we went to secondary sources. And we used Bob's book, of course, to look and see what did I miss? Is there anything missed? We used the History of Concord, which Shattuck published 1835. And there's a whole document on the website. There's a lot of secondary sources that were used. So then, our first question we were asked, who fought from Concord during the 8 years of the Revolutionary War? 514 individuals have been found as of last Sunday to have a birthplace, home, or grave in Concord. It may grow, but we can definitely say there are 514 people that found a birthplace, home, or grave here. 53 persons were not inhabitants of Concord. They were hired by Concord, and they were credited to Concord. So we have a grand total of 567 individuals who served for the town of Concord during the 8 years of the Revolutionary War. So then our other question was, who died or was killed during the 8 years of the Revolutionary War who were from Concord? Like I mentioned, only Reverend Emerson had been spoken on Memorial Day before this. We have 19 men that we found. So we add 18 more that can be read on Memorial Day this year. There are 20 people on this list. The last name is not eligible to be on the roll because he is from Medford. So he should be on their roll. His name is Samson Yarney. He is a free Black man who enlisted, and he enlisted for Concord. While he was enlisted for Concord, he dies. So I gave his information to the Minuteman National Historical Park. I gave his information to the Medford Historical Society, and his information is online at Minuteman National Park website. So you can always find out more about him there. On here, you can see we have Benjamin Ball. His name is listed in Nathan Stowe's orderly book, which is in the back. It's written in pencil on the left-hand side. You're gonna have to like lean in, it's light. But it says B-E-N-J, Benj Ball killed. Benjamin Ball is also mentioned in William Emerson's diary. If anyone has a copy of the book of William Emerson's diary, he's mentioned in there. So where are we looking for this information? We're looking where everyone's looked before, but what questions are we asking now? And that's what we're trying to figure out, where is this information coming from and who knew it? So apparently Reverend Emerson knew at least one of the names. So our third question is, where are they buried? So everybody on the previous slide is most likely buried where they died. They didn't bring people home back then. But this research let us find that 22 veterans' graves were marked for the first time because of this project. 17 of the graves are here in Concord. So most of them are in Sleepy Hollow, but a couple in Old Hill and a couple on Main Street Burying Ground. Then 5 names are in other places. So Purchase Brown is up in Vermont, everybody else is here in Massachusetts. And I just want to talk about Timothy Merriam. So has anyone here ever heard of Merriam's Corner? Yeah, he's from there. He lived there. So Timothy Merriam writes and applies for a pension. And it's because of his pension we learn things. And in his pension, he tells us that on April 19th, he got the word from, here's his pension. He received word that there were going to be, the English were coming, and that he gets on his horse, he warns people in Concord, he warns people in Bedford, and he gets back to the bridge in time to fight. So because of his pension application, we know that he is a midnight rider. So it's not just Paul Revere carrying a lantern on a horse, right? We have Timothy Merriam too now. But the best thing is actually at the bottom of his pension. And this caused a lot of emailing back and forth. So at the very bottom, he writes, his gun was condemned on account of the smallness of its bore, and a French piece was given him in exchange, in consideration of which $10 were deducted from his wages. His gun was worth 2 such French pieces. He is such a New Englander. This is, 1832. He is still upset about having to turn his gun in, and it was 54 years earlier that he turned his gun in. So yeah, Timothy Merriam leaves Concord eventually, becomes a doctor, and he's buried in Framingham, Massachusetts. And I went to visit his grave, and it did not have a marker. So I talked to Tish Hopkins, who is our cemetery supervisor, and asked her if she would contact them, and she did. And Framingham put out a flag for him. So everyone has a flag except Purchase Brown, because the community where he lives is very small and they don't put flags out. But they did mark him as a veteran now, because they did not have him marked as a veteran. So since 1901, the town of Concord has been placing a flag in the plot where Nathaniel French's widow is buried. There's no stone for him. And he would be in plot 85 on this little map. So of course, what I do is I contact Tish and I'm like, hey, what's up with this? So Nathaniel French lived in Concord for many years. He applied for a pension in 1818. In 1820, he had a total of 14 children living, and he still supported 6 of them and his wife. The last few years of his life, he rented Grapevine Cottage, and in his pension, he stated that he was enlisted in the Revolutionary War in 1777 when he was 17, and he served many times. He was awarded his pension. And in here, it actually mentions that his place is not shown where he died. So in 1901, Concord started marking where his wife was in Sleepy Hollow. So I was like, Tish, let's apply for a gravestone. And she did. And we sent all our supporting documentation, and we got a response back of no, because he dies in Vermont. And there's a stone for him in Vermont. So one of his children actually moved to Vermont, was living there. He writes a letter to his son, which is in special collections, and it says that he's not feeling well a couple months before this. And obviously, he felt poorer than he thought, and he dies up there. But it was never relayed to any of the records here. So I never looked for him anywhere else because Concord's been giving him a flag. So we give flags to people, and now we took a flag away. But he has one up there. We can see that he has one up there, so it's okay. All right, so other results that this database has given us is we know that there are at least 22 patriots of color, a badge of merit recipient, 3 people who were captured by the enemy, 3 people reported missing, and 2 citizens who were prisoners of war. So a number of people, these are our people of color. Sorry, the slide is not as pretty as it could be. So the first name is Charlestown. So his name we found because I went through all the documents that I could find online of the town records, and there's a receipt. And if you look at the bottom of the receipt, Charlestown. So Charlestown and Samuel Buttrick. Now, I looked to see if Buttricks ever enslaved people in Concord. I cannot find any Buttrick ever enslaving a person on the books. And I could not find a Samuel Buttrick in Charlestown, because then the next question is this person just from Charlestown? So if you also look, this person is getting double the pay of everybody else for 2 blankets for soldiers on May 28th, 1775. So in my opinion, he's probably enslaved, probably a person of color, right? So he gets to go on the top of my list, because he does not have a last name. He is the first name on the list. Then we have James Freeman, and it says his alias is James Barrett. Like, really? So who is James Freeman? I went through my information. It says stuff about Concord. I don't know where he was in town, but he is definitely somebody of Concord. So he's on my list. Then we have Charlestown Eads here. So Charlestown Eads was enslaved in Groton. His pay went to his enslaver. It says so in their history books. And he moves here to Concord after the war, and he buys property with Brister Freeman and lives here until he becomes ill, and he dies here in town. But on here, he is listed as a wagoner. So he would have had the horses and wagons and delivered goods around. Also on this muster roll from 1780, is Philip Barrett, who was enslaved by the Barrett family. He was 14 on April 19th, and they are in the same little group here, right? And he is listed as on guard that day. So we have 2 of our patriots of color on the same muster roll, which I thought was pretty neat. All right. So then we move on to our only woman on our list, Martha Moulton. Hashtag Martha Moulton, we gotta make her famous. So the reason we have downtown Concord like we do is because of her. So like it says, she was 71 years old on April 19th, and she literally saves the town from burning down. Little fire catches, she asks the redcoats to put it out. They're like, nah. She's like, no, really, you need to put it out. They do put it out. And it's wonderful that she puts a paper forth in her words, because there's so little with women's words, I feel, especially on April 19th. And she asks for payment for saving the town. And you can see the committee's like, yeah, you're a heroine. Let's pay you. Because she was paid for her service, we put her on the list. We're like, that counts. So everyone, Martha Moulton. All right. Then this is not just a list that has colonists on it that fought for freedom. We're including everyone. So John Bateman of the 52nd Regiment was injured on April 19th. He was kept here in town and eventually dies. George Black is one of Burgoyne's soldiers. So in the back, there's something that I call the Book of Death, and it's a compilation of deaths in town, handwritten. And I was looking for somebody else, and on the page it says, George Black one of Burgoyne's soldiers. 1821 he dies. So more than 40 years after the end of the war, they're still pegging him as one of Burgoyne's soldiers. So in 1810, he was on the federal census, as he was listed as a foreigner. 1816, he appears on Overseers of the Poor documents, and then he eventually dies here in town. And so he's buried here, we just don't know where. Then, of course, we have brothers Daniel Bliss and Samuel Bliss. Daniel Bliss, pretty much, if you're from Concord, you know what happens to him. Yeah. But he is a lawyer. He kind of has to leave town because he's loyal to the king. And he goes to Canada, dies there. And his brother Samuel was part of the 2nd Battalion of the newly formed, as in June 13, 1775, it formed 1 week before Bunker Hill, Royal Highland Emigrants. And it was later known as the 84th Regiment of Foot. And Lieutenant Bliss did recruitment for his regiment and was said to have retired with the rank of captain. We have Samuel Lee, who was part of the 18th Royal Regiment. He was captured in Concord on April 19th and stayed, married Mary Piper, had 5 kids with her. And yeah, he became a happy resident of Concord. Yeah. John Troop was also one of Burgoyne's soldiers. So there's a mortuary notice for him where it says that by the Americans at the surrender of the British Army of Burgoyne in 1777, he was a native of Scotland, and he afterwards enlisted as a soldier in the American service. So he served both sides in that war. And then we have James Price. Now, he's actually from Canada, so not really a British soldier, kinda. But what he does is at the dawn of the late Revolution, he signaled himself in facilitating the passage of the American troops into that province, and perhaps it would not be too much to say that to his seasonable activity exerted at the hazard of his own property, in no small degree, the success of our arms at St. John's in Montreal. So he helps the American troops. Somehow he winds up in Concord. And then when he dies here, he chooses to have his funeral without ceremony or funeral parade. And he dies in 1802. But it just says he's buried in the old graveyard. It doesn't actually say if he's in Old Hill or Main Street. So I'm not really sure where he is. But those are our British. So we're giving equal opportunity, equal, time to the British. And then cashiering. Does anyone know what cashiering is? Somebody knows. You're all shy. All right, so cashiering is a ritual dismissal of an individual from some position of responsibility for a breach of discipline, and it happens in the military. So we have Ephraim Wheeler. And these are 2 documents that really say the same thing, but they're listed in different books in the archives. And he was cashiered by a general court-martial, December 22, 1777. And so these are index cards that you can find on Family Search, but the originals, this is what the original document is, and you can see he's cashiered by a general court-martial on December 22, 1777. Anyone can find more information about that, please do. I don't know anything else about it. I think it'd be a great story. I'd love to know what he did. So yeah. And finally, we're gonna talk about pensions. I love pensions. They're my favorite thing in the world because it's the person's voice and you get their, how they are feeling about things. And depending on when you apply for a pension, you have to include different information. So if it's 1818, you have to be really in dire straits. You're supposed to give them your family information and how much money you have and list all your things that you own in your house and all. So, and then as you get later on, they don't make you do as much. From the pensions, we'll talk about first Micah Davis. So he says in his pension, I was in the memorable battle at Concord Bridge in 1775 as a militiaman, and after my enlistment in 1777 was in Fort Edward when it was attacked by the Indians and at the capture of Burgoyne in 1777. And among his list of possessions in his pension was an old copy of Pilgrim's Progress worth $50. We have Jeremiah Williams on April 19th. It says in 1777, being then a clerk in a store in the town of Concord and state of Massachusetts, He volunteered on the 19th of April as a citizen on the side of the colonists and was in the whole of the Battle of Lexington, stood by the side of Captain Isaac Davis when he fell on that day. So we hear who was there. If you weren't in a minute company, if your name wasn't recorded in the book, how else do we know you were there? They're telling us. We have Jonas Brown, and he says, from the 1st of January, 1775 to the 1st of May, I was enlisted as a Minuteman, being a militia and resident of Concord, Mass., under Captain Buttrick of the militia, and trained twice a week, and with the rest of the company kept guard most of the time over the public stores, roads, and bridges in Concord. Early on the 19th of April, an alarm was given that the enemy were coming from Boston to Concord, and our company was paraded about daylight and kept under arms most of the time until the enemy arrived and destroyed military stores and provisions and set a guard at the bridge. And I was ordered with others to rout them, which we did, when several were killed on both sides and the enemy retreated. And we pursued to Menotomy, had various skirmishing on the road, and I returned to Concord. Then some of them are real tearjerkers. David Melvin talks about, he testifies and says that on the 1st of May, 1775, I enlisted as a private soldier. He further says he enlists again in 1776, and then he enlists again. He's at soldier's fortune, and at the end, I further testify that I am an old man, passing 66 years, and am very poor, and in indigent circumstances, and stand in great need of the assistance of government, that I am now an inhabitant of Lincolnville, Maine. I have no family nor home. It's gut-wrenching, some of them. But then we have widows are allowed to apply for pensions later on. And Sarah Ambrose applied for a pension. Her first husband was Joseph Cleasby of Concord. He was a Minuteman in Captain Charles Miles' company. And in 1840, she was 99, and she applies for a pension. Just so you know, she dies a year later, and they say she's 98 years and 4 months old. So she got younger over a year. But her 76-year-old son provides a supporting letter for her, and he says, he states and he testifies that when about 11 years of age, in the year AD 1775, he was sent by my mother, now Sarah Ambrose, from Concord, Mass. To Winter Hill, near Cambridge, several times with clothing and other articles to my father, Joseph Cleasby, deceased, above named, who was then in service at the Revolution, stationed at Winter Hill. So an 11-year-old boy back then being sent to Winter Hill with food, clothing, whatever for his dad. Pretty impressive. Marcy Brown is the wife of Purchase Brown, and after his death, she applies for a pension. Her daughter Sarah writes a great letter, and she says that her father, formerly a resident of Concord in the state of Mass, soldier of the Revolution, that her father often related his war stories to his family and neighbors and brother soldiers, relating his services and hardships while in the army, the places through which he traveled, where he was stationed, and although I do not now recollect but a small part of what he used to relate, there are many things there too which I do now perfectly well remember, his being in the Battle of Bunker Hill, his hardships on the march to Quebec, his being with General Arnold at that place the first year of the war, the sufferings of the troops on their march, and after they arrived at Quebec, the sickness with the smallpox, which prevailed to an alarming extent among the troops, and a large number of them died, that after the defeat of the army in the spring, the troops retreated up the St. Lawrence through Lake Champlain to Ticonderoga. He often mentioned the name of Colonel Reed, Captain Holmes, many other officers, which I do not now recollect. I always understood from my father that when he joined the troops that were engaged at Bunker Hill, that he was in the army most of the time to the close of the war. They denied the pension because the widow wrote a letter, the daughter wrote a letter, but there was no supporting paperwork from anybody else that was with him. They're up in Vermont. She was not from Concord. So they didn't get anybody who knew him to write a supporting letter. So she was not issued her pension, or his pension. Great story about the Liberty Pole. You guys have heard about the Liberty Pole in town. Joseph Wilson, in his pension, says that in 1775 he resided in Concord and was discovered that the cannons, they were spiked, took about 100 barrels of flour to the redcoats. They rolled them into a mill pond in order to destroy the same. And then the declarant hoisted the American flag on the Liberty Pole that morning. And when that flag was discovered by the British, they ordered the flag to be taken down. In doing which, the halliards by which the flag was hoisted got entangled, and the flag came down about halfway, which, being discovered by the British officers, they ordered the Liberty Pole to be cut down, which was immediately done so by the British soldiers. So if you wonder what happened to the British, the Liberty Pole, he put a flag on it, and then the British couldn't get it down, and then they cut it down. So there's story after story in the pensions that are like this. The same person, his 94-year-old mother, writes an affidavit for him, and she's funny. She remembers him going to war because she had to prepare clothing for him, but doesn't remember exactly how long he was gone. And once he became of age, he no longer was under the care of the family, and she heard from him even less. Except she heard he was taken prisoner at one point, and he was. So those are some of the things that the pensions tell us that we can add to the stories. And sometimes in the pensions, they mention people they're with from Concord that I didn't find in my first going through of things, so I have to add names to the list. So now what? So don't throw away your shot to be part of history. You can make the list more complete. You can look, if you are a wheeler, there's gotta be a wheeler in the room somewhere, somebody related to a wheeler. Oh, you see, a wheeler, nice. You know, are all your people on there? Do we have the right things? Is there somebody missing? Or if you're just an enthusiast about the Minutemen in town, are all the people on there? Did I remember everyone? For the longest time, Joseph Hosmer was not on my list, just so you know. Sometimes you forget the important people because they're always around, right? Or if reading handwriting that's cursive is your superpower, the National Archives is trying to have all of the pensions typed up, and it's all online, so you could help transcribe those if you choose. And really, just like this picture doesn't tell us everything, all the research that we've done so far doesn't tell us everything. There's things that are missing. I call it perfectly imperfect what we have. And really, that's it. So thank you. All right, okay, good. And if you have any questions, you can give questions, but if not, that's okay. She has a microphone if you want to wait. Just for the Zoomers eventually. I'd hear you. What was the first question? Over here? In the front. No.
I'll get to everyone. We have time.
Thanks. Beth, yeah, you referred to a woman that did something extraordinary very early in your talk. Was it Martha Moulton that you were talking to about that? Okay, that was my first question. Yeah. The other one was on the pole. Do we know which flag they tried to fly?
He spells flag with 2 G's. I mean, things are so, there's no standard dictionary, right? So things are not quite spelled properly. You gotta figure things out. But he just says that he hoisted the Americans' flag, F-L-A-G-G, on a Liberty Pole. So I don't know which one.
But it wouldn't have been the Betsy Ross flag.
No.
Okay, no, okay. All right, thank you.
Okay, sure.
Yeah.
You said this was being recorded. Will we be able to access it online to the library?
It'll be through the town of... The recording will be posted to the Minutemen Media Network, but we will also create a link on the website of the library, but I can also forward the link to everyone who's registered today. So you'll have lots of ways to get it to it. We'll put it in lots of places. I'll ask Beth where to put it, but we'll make sure it's accessible.
Okay. Oh, hold on.
My favorite thing about your research, Beth, is all the myths that you bust. What was your favorite myth that you bust through this research?
Oh, I don't know. Favorite myth that I bust? I don't know, did I bust myths? I have no idea. I just like finding the story. I like finding people's stories in their words because I feel a lot of the times you're told something. It's like the game of telephone. You start with one thing and you wind up with something else at the end. So yeah, I kind of like having the words of people, the primary sources. Bob has one?
So Beth, you've got the spreadsheet with all the names. Will you be posting a way to click on the name and go to the original source?
Eventually, when it's a finished product, probably. But right now, it is a PDF file, and it's still a work in progress. Nate Smith does not want people to touch it or edit it, but eventually that would be a great thing to do.
I was saying, especially the pension records.
They're the best. They're my favorites, yeah.
And do you know on the Liberty Pole story where he said it was located?
He does. He mentions it's behind.
Because I thought it was right above the Reuben Brown house.
Let's see, what does he say? And because I may have, not written the whole thing in here. Barrows of Flour, Bunker Hill, Colonel Gardner, Field. He doesn't say, or at least it's not in my little thing that I typed up. I assume it's over there, though. I mean, that's where we've said it is. And it's mentioned in other people's, it's mentioned, like Thaddeus Blood mentions it, and other people mention where it is on the hill. So even if this one doesn't, other pensions do. Yeah.
Of the list of people that you found who died or were killed during the war, are you able to determine who was killed in action?
Yeah. We have one that was killed in action, John Corneal, because it says it. Let's see. Scroll up, scroll up. Keep going. So, John Corneal, he was in Miles's Minute Company, and October 1707, his card literally says that he's killed in action, and we believe it's the Second Battle of Saratoga. So, yeah.
So the men that were captured, the Burgoyne's men who were captured, I'm assuming it was Saratoga, how did they end up in Concord? Do we know that?
They march.
I mean, they were marched here as prisoners of war?
They're not technically called prisoners of war, right? What are they called? You read the book.
The Convention Army.
The Convention Army for everyone at home.
Okay.
The surrender was politically a little problematic, so the two military principals worked out this thing they called a convention. The Continental Congress never accepted it. So these folks who were supposed to be marched to Boston, put on ships, and sent back to England instead spent the next 7 years marching around. They were in Cambridge, Charlestown for some months. There's a wonderful description of the army. So these are Hessians and British, and there's a wonderful description, Hannah Winthrop's description of them coming into Cambridge. But from here they were marched away. Many of them ended up in southern Pennsylvania, but they were 7 years and dwindling all the time. People walking away and people dying.
We're talking about thousands of men.
1,700, 2,000, something like that. Women and children and soldiers. Yeah.
Thank you so much for this talk and for sharing with us so many of these, stories that have not been widely shared before. I have a specific question now that I'm looking at this slide more carefully and seeing that only one of these is listed, only one of these names is listed as having been killed in action. So that's only, it's less like 5% of, do we know is this typical? Is this typical that only 5% of the deaths were actually from action, and what else was killing all these people
Disease.
in the war?
A lot of disease.
I see.
Like what the daughter of Purchase Brown wrote, you know, there's smallpox happening,
Right.
all these things. They kill so many of them. So yeah,
That's astonishing.
yeah, it is.
If I were to volunteer to look into, I'm sure, an ancestor's being cashiered, would you guide me
Oh, sure.
where to look?
I have no idea. That's why I haven't done it. We're gonna talk to Bob. We're gonna volunteer Bob Gross to help us, or Joel Bowie. Oh, but I'm sure, like, somebody's gotta, like, be able to, I've looked on all my usual places, and I haven't found anything else. And actually, I find a lot of stuff about other cashiering things, but not this one. So, but yeah, we can talk. Yeah.
Terrific, thank you.
So the covenant, you know, in 1774, they signed that. So Benjamin Ball was too young to sign it then. He's a kid still, but his dad signs it. So are they a resident? How do we know that they have a birthplace, home, or grave here, right? The grave isn't happening. So birthplace or home.
So that's your indication?
Yeah, that's me.
Hi, Beth. If I remember right, something like 25 regulars were listed as missing on April 19th afterwards. Did any of them settle back in Concord that we know of? I mean, if they absconded, did they come back here?
It's a great question. We know that we are trying, well, we know John Bateman was here. I'm trying to figure out where he's buried. Some people, they're said that they were captured. Some people don't believe they were captured. Some people believe they kind of lay down their arms. Some people stay, like we know Samuel Lee stayed, but I feel like we're calling out anybody who was part of that army. We call them out here in Concord. I don't know if other communities do. Any of you, either of you have anything to add, Bob or David? No? Okay.
Second question I had was, I believe a number of soldiers of color were hired by Concord to fill the quotas. Have you seen any disparity between those who got pensions and those who did not get pensions in terms of color?
No, none of those 22 names have a pension attached to them. Well, if they die before 1818, they're not eligible. Because there is no, so you're only having a pension before 1818 if you were injured and you became an invalid and you got a half pension automatically. But if it's not until 1818, pensions start, and you have to be destitute. There's a number of men who seek out Black soldiers to have them write affidavits to help them get their pensions. And there are a number of Black soldiers that do get pensions, but none of them are here from Concord. Okay.
It's worth adding that there were Black soldiers who did get pensions. And in that case, you could say they were recognized as citizens because it was a civic right, according to the statute of Congress. And I think in that case, they probably were recognized as citizens of the United States, contrary to the Dred Scott decision.
So I will say one person in Concord did receive a badge of merit, and he's buried in Sleepy Hollow. I know of 5 Black soldiers who were awarded the same award, and I found the original document at Mass Archives. So I will say, yeah, exactly what Bob said, they were absolutely recognized. So.
How much money are we talking about in terms of pension?
Depends on what you did and how long you were in for. So if you were a higher level person, you got more money. If you were in longer, you got more money. You were lower level and you were in a very short period of time, you didn't get as much.
Did you check any of those names against the DAR, GRS system or the SAR system of their list of patriots to see if, it wouldn't be comprehensive, it's if somebody proved them, but
Right.
to look for pensions and things?
At times when I am searching, Ancestry.com a lot of times has the SAR applications, and they are available through Ancestry.com. There is a book from the Sons of the American Revolution when they first issued the flag markers to certain graves. So I have that book that I access. But I have not really done anything with the SAR or DAR because I'm looking for people that we don't know. So it's more the people who do we not know that's here versus the people we already know, because we know who the Minutemen at least say they are, right? We have those lists. It's not everybody though. So where can we find information that other people don't have?
Thank you so much for coming this afternoon. Thank you so much, Beth, for your fantastic presentation. And please remember, there are some selections from special collections in the town archives that Beth and I prepared for you in the back of the room. And I will make sure that, again, Beth's presentation is posted in a place where you can find it, and also her database as a PDF, so you cannot edit it, is also on the town's website.
It is.
It's just a little buried, so I will make sure to send you some direct links to that through Assabet. So you'll get another email from Assabet, including those links. Cool. Thank you so much for coming. Have a great afternoon.
Thank you.